Good evening and welcome to a special edition of To The Point. This evening with a distinguished gentleman, we'll be discussing one of the key partnerships between Egypt and its European ally, Germany. Lots of business to business, lots of potential will be under discussion this evening. With us this evening is Engineer Mohammed Ismail Makhlouf, who is the member of the Egyptian-German Chamber of Commerce, amongst so many other hats, so to speak. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is all mine.
Since President Sisi came to office, one of what we would refer to as the strategic partners, politically and economically, has been Germany. Without going into so many details, but can you tell us economically, what's the weight of that partnership and in what sectors?
Okay, well, first of all, we have to understand that the economic cooperation between Germany and Egypt has a long history. In fact, the first economic bill that was delivered by Germany to Egypt was 150 years ago when they contributed to the railroads in Egypt.
Yes.
So it's not a new thing. However, this cooperation took a springboard jump from 2014 onwards, based on the very solid political relationship that emerged between the two countries, and that laid the foundation for large-scale projects to be contributed to by Germany. Notably, the most prominent one has been in the energy sector,
yes,
where we have 3 large power stations that were contributed to by Germany. Also, they've contributed in the infrastructure sector, again in the railroads and the infrastructure of that. They've looked at urbanization as well, and the new developments. They have been looking at the agricultural sector and the irrigation.
Okay.
And they have been introducing technologies and new methods of irrigation that would allow us to reduce the wastewater, because we do have a lot of waste happening in our irrigation water at the moment. They have been focusing also on some other sectors, like, for example, training and the vocational training and development of youth, trying to reduce unemployment, looking at women's development in Egypt, things that do have more of a social dimension than a direct economical one. So it's been a diversity of sectors, but the most prominent one and the strongest or the largest scale one has been the energy sector. That was what characterized our cooperation from then until now. The annual cooperation, or the bill of cooperation so far, has risen to about $1.7 billion between us and Germany. There are about 11 new projects that are scheduled for 2021 that amount to about 132 million euros of investment in several sectors in Egypt, and more to come, really.
When you talk about several sectors, are there any, in 2021, will we see an investment in new sectors that Germany has not, because it seems the investment is quite diversified. I mean,
yes.
So is there something more new, if we can put it that way?
Well, I would say no. It's actually this diversity of sectors that I just stated are the ones that are going to absorb the majority of these projects. Nevertheless, I do advocate that we do have a lot of room for expanded cooperation between us and Germany. The basis for cooperation so far has been more or less unidirectional, in the sense that Germany would come in with some funding support and would come in with some know-how or technology or the likes.
Okay.
And what I advocate is that there is actually more of a two-way street that can be developed between us and Germany, that can increase the amount of engagement between Germany and Egypt, and at the same time bring the benefit to both countries.
Okay.
At the moment, the economic support that Germany is affording to Egypt is in the form of either loans or what we call debt swaps or investments. The majority of them are in the form of loans and debt swaps. Debt swaps are something similar to what we call in the business world convertible debt, which means you can either return the money or return the debt or transfer it into becoming an investment or an equity holding in the projects. Now, that's a good model, of course, but I do believe that there can be more developed models to engage cooperation between both countries. Germany can benefit from Egypt as much as Egypt is benefiting from Germany, in many ways, actually. The first thing that comes to mind is the fact that given the new era of communication and the internet, etc., this has uncovered a lot of talent that was previously hidden in Egypt.
Yes.
We do have a wealth of youth, and you know that the population in Egypt has a big component of it in under 18 and under 25.
Which is missing in Germany.
Which is missing in Germany, for
Yes.
one. Number two, we do have a big pool of talent actually in Egypt. It's even manifested in the international awards that keep being given to even universities like Mansoura or like,
Yes.
things like that.
For lots of innovations.
Indeed. So what can happen, as the talent pool in Egypt gets uncovered, it is an opportunity for Germany to make use of that talent to develop sustainable projects in Egypt using German technology and know-how and training and developing this youth and human resource.
Okay.
They can also benefit from the location of Egypt as a haven.
Can I interrupt
Yes,
you for a
please.
second? Because when you talk about youth, I can hear at the back of my head some people saying, there we go, the brain drain.
Yes, yes.
How can we protect the brain drain? Because you suggested this as one of the potentials.
Yes,
How can we do this? It has to be a win-win situation.
of course, absolutely.
But at the same time, you don't want it to be a brain drain situation.
Absolutely.
Is there a way to control this?
Yes, indeed, there is. In fact, this was what I was going to suggest. So, for example, let me just draw a picture in front of you to give you an example. Let's say that we develop an economical ecosystem around agriculture.
Okay.
What does that entail? It entails the technologies of, for example, genetic modification, organic crop growing, or smart irrigation systems, water purification, water pumping from underground wells, hydrogeological studies. All this goes inside the ecosystem of developing new arid areas, developing them into agricultural havens. That requires technology, requires engineering, and requires projects. Now, all this can be developed using our talent and the German know-how, and that talent gets engaged in those projects, so they become owners of those projects. So the talent gets developed in cooperation with Germany, but at the same time it's given ownership of those projects in Egypt, so they stay. You don't drain the brain, but they become qualified to the standard that Germany has brought forward, and they therefore become international. That allows them also to, whatever it is that they produce, to become a production hub for the region. In fact, Germany can benefit from this because let us say that if we move a little bit from the agriculture to the manufacturing sector or the production sector,
Okay.
let's say electronics as an example. Germany is very strong in electronics. Egypt has many electronics engineers. They can develop those engineers and develop electronic industries at the small to medium-sized level in the industrial zones. And using German know-how and technology and being certified internationally, they can become owners of these manufacturing plants in partnership with Germany.
Okay.
And that can become a distribution hub for Africa, for Middle East, and for
And
the
here we
region.
go to our geographical location.
Exactly. So
Okay.
they benefit from the geographic location. In fact, Egypt, because of its strategic location, has the benefit of being able to provide to the African continent east and west
Yes.
in an economical way, because the Suez Canal is not necessarily a barrier. You know, the Suez Canal is in general in the shipping world is an expense.
Yes.
But you can always transport by road between Mediterranean and Red Sea within Egypt. It's the only place where you can do that.
Yes.
So you can actually serve East Africa and West Africa from Egypt.
Yes.
Today, Germany has industries. It's strong in electronics, it's strong in the solar industry, it's strong in the medical industry. And when it manufactures, what it does, it sets the standard and goes and manufactures it elsewhere, where there is lower cost, like in China or in India. Egypt should qualify as being one of those havens, where it does offload the manufacturing to the German standard in Egypt and uses it as a distribution hub to the region. That would be a strategic move that involves the value that both countries bring to the table. And it becomes a two-way street. They would benefit, Egypt would benefit. And the talent pool would stay in Egypt. They own now projects that are productive and exporting as well.
What other sectors are we looking at? Which sector is getting the largest chunk, if we can put it that way, in 2021?
I
In
believe
the past, it was energy,
Yes.
and we needed a lot in energy,
Yes.
and we're going to go into that in a few
Yes.
moments. But is there another sector that's getting a big chunk
I
this year?
think the renewable energy sector is the one that is emerging hard, and that
Okay.
involves solar energy and wind energy.
Okay.
In fact, Germany has been one of the countries that pioneered solar, but at the same time, Egypt exists in the luminance belt that is privileged
Exactly.
in terms of solar energy. And now the market, after the removal of subsidies and the likes, the renewable energy market in Egypt has taken a big jump northwards.
Yes.
It is now the time for Germany, specifically Germany, to invest in the renewable energy industry in Egypt and develop again a hub along the same lines. So, for example, and there could be actually even cross breeding between two industries, and I'll mention that to you. For example, let's talk about wind energy. Wind energy is currently, in current technology, reliant on big wind turbines. So
Yes.
there is turbine technology in there. Turbine technology requires some know-how. That can be transferred to Egypt, and in fact, Egypt can become a manufacturing haven for those wind turbines and a maintenance place as well for them.
Yes.
If that is developed...
To make it more cost effective as well.
More cost effective. And then it can serve the entire African continent.
Okay.
Not only that, if you have a big maintenance facility for turbines, you can also serve the classic power plants because they also operate on turbine technology.
Okay.
So you see, you can also serve the other industries using the same characteristic know-how. And that is a strategic move. It's an ecosystem that you develop here. I believe that it is time for us to go a little bit outside the box and start looking strategically at developing those ecosystems.
You can get the know-how, but
Yes.
what about the qualified engineers, the qualified labor?
Well,
The blue and white collars, so to speak. Do we have those?
yes, I think I advocate that we do have them. Yes, they do need a little bit more training.
Okay.
But it doesn't take much, doesn't take long. Maybe the vocational training will be a bit of a longer road, but that again is manageable. I mean, there are systems and there are ways of developing blue collar, and there are ways and systems to develop white collar. I believe and I advocate that the amount of engineers and white collar qualifying candidates require not very much training until they become worldwide international standard, and this has been proven, by the way, across the ages.
Okay.
So I think that it is an opportunity if Germany or any country in Europe, but particularly Germany, to capitalize on the rich human resource of Egypt and develop a backyard for Germany in Egypt as a manufacturing and even, to be honest, as a technology development hub. It can create a lot of sustained value for both countries. And when I say technology development, I'm saying this because we do have lots of research institutions in Egypt, and we do have lots of technology content in Egypt that hasn't yet been uncovered. And creating kind of cooperation between industry and academia is something that Germany can contribute a lot to, because it's still not a very well-known subject in Egypt. You know, it's not very developed. So there are opportunities for Germany to come in and make a revolution in this sense in Egypt alongside the Egyptians, and both countries will benefit.
When it comes to renewable energy, Egypt has a very ambitious plan with different time frames. And if we look at the closest agenda would be 2030, which we're all talking about. How clean can we be by 2030?
Okay, well, I know the plan is very ambitious, and I have to be honest with you. Looking at the curve, I think that it is very difficult to reach that ambition. I think we will reach a portion of that ambition, but you have to aim for the stars if you want to go to the moon.
Okay.
So yes, we are aiming for the stars. I believe we will reach the moon. I think that by 2030, okay, I'm going to throw a figure, but that figure, don't hold it against me.
Okay.
I think that instead of claiming that we are going to be 45% or 40% clean, or the component of renewable energy from our portfolio or energy generation would be 40%, I would advocate we're going to be between 10 and 15%. And that would be an excellent achievement, by the way. So I think that we're going to be more towards that. However, the curve is not linear. From the time we hit 2030, and if we keep moving in the right direction, the curve will exponentially grow. And I think that we can become clean to a large measure by 2050, maybe, for those who are still alive at the time. But 2030 is close by, and I think 10 to 15% of the total energy requirement of Egypt to be served by renewable energy is a good target.
When you put this percentage forth, are you taking into account that lots of people on an individual basis really are starting to go
Yes, of course.
solar, as you had mentioned earlier, now that the subsidies are cut?
Yes, there are two aspects to this. One is the residential market, which is people in their homes are starting to exactly.
I mean, if you look at the rooftops in most compounds now, people are
Yes.
using this to cut down on.
Indeed. Of course, I believe that the residential market will be a big off-taker of solar products. Not so much wind, because you cannot miniaturize wind
Not
to
wind,
the
but
same scale. But
we see the solar panels.
solar panels. There are limitations to that. One is that the architectural paradigm with which these buildings were built was not geared for solar for the most part. So not all houses will be able to entertain this.
The new
developments.
New developments are doing that.
That could account for a portion of it. But more notably, actually, I think that the agricultural and the oil and gas sector will be taking a lot of off-grid solar applications that will account for a big portion of that. When I say 10 to 15%, I do include all this in it, because actually the biggest consumer of, let's say, of fossil fuel energy is the power generation plants themselves. And the oil refineries and the big factories and things like that. There are limitations of how much renewable you can feed into heavy industries, for example. So the 10 to 15% does seem like a reasonable number by 2030.
The technology, when in the past, I mean, if I look back a few years back, and whenever we got someone to talk about renewable energy, usually the picture was quite pessimistic.
Yes.
Because it's quite expensive.
Yes.
The problem is not in the plant, it's in the battery.
Yes.
I believe the technology changed.
Yes.
But can we go and further and say that while we're saying we're going to be 10 to 15, whatever percent by 2030, what about the production itself? Because the largest cost is in the importation of those plants, those panels, rather than in the batteries or whatever technology it is right now.
Yes.
Can we say that Egypt can also, aside from the turbines, Egypt can also be a hub for the production of solar panels and
Yes.
export it even?
Categorically, yes. We're already doing that. Point here is that this is where, again, if we go back to Germany, Germany can contribute a great deal to this. What has happened in the last, let's say, decade was that the majority of the European countries, Germany included, left the playing field to China because they could produce these products at a much lower cost.
Labor.
Labor. Well,
which is your issue here.
Which is the issue here. Actually, it's not just labor. It's labor. It is Chinese government subsidies. It is almost no taxation. It is export incentives that the Chinese government gives, and labor as well. Now, all of these factors can be mitigated in Egypt, and with the cooperation of technology coming from Germany, as it evolves into new products and more efficient products, this combination can turn Egypt into a production hub of renewable energy, solar specific, and become an exportation hub to the region and to the world, actually. So, for example, one of the very important economic factors in the new renewable systems is the efficiency of the system. That efficiency relies on new technology evolving that produces cells that are more efficient. Europe, Germany specifically, are going into a lot of research on this. So they bring the results of that research to the manufacturing haven in Egypt. That combination becomes a strong alternative to what exists today. And it can export. And I believe it can. I know the economics of this industry well. And I'm telling you, yes, of course we can.
What else can we work in terms of, before we work in, maybe one of the questions would be, it's a win-win situation.
Yes.
Where does Germany need Egypt? Aside from the youth, it needs the young people.
Of course.
Because it really has a problem with that right now. Aside from that, what does Germany need from Egypt?
I advocate, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, I advocate Egypt presents to Germany a much lower cost haven for manufacturing lots of its products to feed both the European market and global market and the African and Middle Eastern market as well, but primarily also to the European. It presents an alternative to Germany, where the technology could be developed in Germany or jointly between Germany and Egypt, and manufactured in Egypt for distribution under German brand into Europe and into other countries. That will increase the profitability of German firms in a big way. The German economy relies to a large measure on small to medium-sized enterprises, by the way. And these enterprises are looking for profitability. They can offload their manufacturing on Egypt, and they can benefit from that.
The world is facing a catastrophe. COVID-19 has really put all economies, governments, and everything to the test.
Yes.
Europe is badly hit. And even though the numbers, according to latest statistics today, the numbers in Germany are going a bit down, but unfortunately, as numbers go down, the ferociousness of the virus is going up. Yes. What kind of cooperation can we benefit from? Because sometimes when there's always a positive to a negative. How can we turn the negative in Europe into a positive in our cooperation in the face of COVID-19? Because we're not as scarred.
Yes, at least officially.
At least officially.
What I say is the following. COVID is poised to change the way the world operates. I believe that even when it goes away, many things are not going to go back as they were. There will be much more work from home happening. There will be much more remote communication happening, etc. So the need for high-tech and software and Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and all these kind of products, the need for that is going to be on the grow. It is no secret that Egypt is a big haven for this. We have strong development people, human resource and firms in Egypt that rival in their quality the ones in India and are not very far from India in terms of cost. So in fact, the new era that is going to be defined post-COVID can be served by Egypt as a hub for development of these kind of products that support the industry and support commerce in a good way through cooperation between the two countries. So that would be the first thing that comes to mind in terms of COVID. Now, what happens in the hard industry, in the things that are just not handleable by online facilities, that the jury is still out. Nobody can really tell how it's going to unfold. But as I say, now is the strategic time. Now is the time to build a cooperation model that relies on the value of both countries and anchor that towards the future. That would be my...
How strong is the European bloc, in your opinion, in face of COVID-19? And the reason I'm asking this is because after Brexit, there are lots of, and I will here have to say, for the sake of our viewers, lots of rumors. We've heard terms like Frexit, for example. And then people went and say, what would it be called? Exit or Gexit or what? There is this fear that a domino effect in the face of COVID will take place and we'll see a disintegration of that bloc. How do you see this and how will this affect us?
Well, first of all, how it will affect us, it depends on how it unfolds.
Yes.
But how it will unfold will depend on how the European population sees matters. You see, there are many big benefits to being a bloc, but there are also drawbacks to that. The speed of movement, the agility, the flexibility, the independence of decision, the market competitiveness, all this can suffer from being a bloc. Besides, it's not very wise in the modern world, given the multipolarity that is emerging in the world, to be unicentric in terms of political and economic decision. You have to be able to role play with the world. So it may not be that detrimental to Europe to disintegrate, at least from an economic standpoint or an economic common market standpoint, and yet maintain this tacit agreement between them that they are in alliance, which is the case. So it's like companies when they over-consolidate and then they start to fragment, yet maintain an alliance so that they maintain the agility and the ability to be able to role play and even deal with different competitors in different ways, yet there is this tacit agreement between them. I don't think that Europe is going to suffer, even if there was Frexit or Gexit or whoever. I don't think they will suffer from that. Nor do I think the UK will suffer from Brexit. There will be different dynamics. Again, as I say always, the jury is still out to see what are the pros going to overweigh the cons or vice versa. How we can benefit from that is, as when you're dealing with a country, is different than dealing with a bloc. It is much easier for us to make a deal with Germany than it is to make a deal with the European Union.
Yes.
So I think that in terms of economic cooperation, it will give us more options if there is such a disintegration. And decision making will be easier and quicker. And now I'm not sure if they're going to revert to different currencies or not. That may complicate matters a little bit. If they maintain the euro, despite the fact of exiting the common market, that could be very beneficial to them and to the world.
Whenever we talk about relationship with government on an economic front, we're always, between countries, we're always talking government to government, even though really most of the economy, really, or half of the economy at least, is on the shoulders of the private sector. The business to business, we have with us on the line, we'll go back to the question, we have with us on the line Jan Noether, Chief Executive Officer of the German Chamber of Commerce. Can you hear us?
Very well, yeah. I can hear you very
good
well.
evening.
Good evening.
I was just raising a question about the business to business. Whenever we talk, we have a lot of big government to government cooperation with Germany. But what about opportunities for business to business? How do you see that in 2021?
There are of course lots of business opportunities. However, we have to take into consideration, especially this year, that we have a special COVID situation, and that of course makes German companies a little bit hesitant to invest overall. There was a survey recently conducted in Germany, and there were more than 30,000 German companies to participate, and the appetite for investments, not only investments abroad, investments in Germany as well, can be considered rather limited this year. Only 16% of these participants in that survey said that they would invest in a greater deal this year.
Okay.
Having said that, Egypt, of course, is very much on the radar of German companies, and we are, of course, striving to enlarge this foreign direct investment into our country.
Any cooperation it has to be a win-win kind of cooperation. What kind of potential does Germany see in Egypt?
There is lots of potential. The German companies, of course, they are very much known for extensive due diligences, to mitigate investment or project risks. So in other words, the Germans, they take their own time to decide whether or not and when it makes sense to engage in a new field of activities or in an emerging market. In this sense, German companies value political economic stability, today's and future growth rates, market size, location. But when we come to Egypt, the Germans, they very much recognize what's going on. The Germans applaud that the economic reform program as initiated in 2016 bears fruits. They appreciate the new investment law, the new customs law. Tomorrow, the German Chamber runs a webinar on the new import regulations, and we have more than 100 participants. More than 60 of those come from Germany, which shows us that there is interest in the Egyptian market. They appreciate the efforts of the Egyptian government and of the private sectors when it comes to digitization, which is a very important topic. The Egyptian government as well as the private sector very, very much has strong endeavors in that field. And of course, and that's maybe one of the most important topics, the efforts of the Egyptian government to cut down on the administrative efforts to create a more welcoming atmosphere.
Is there a specific sector? I mean, Germany contributed a lot to in the energy sector, but is there another sector that Germany wants to have a stronger participation in Egypt?
There are lots of sectors. Yeah, when we look into our 3,000 members, they are widespread, those members, in various fields of activities and industrial sectors. Well, as you know, the Germans are very strong in the car or in the machinery industry. However, there is already investment in the chemical sector, pharmaceutical sector, oil and gas sector. Yeah, you mentioned energy, wind, solar. However, if we look into now the new projects to come up, there is the mobility project, which certainly is a big topic, and everybody in Germany sees what Siemens, for example, as the flagship of the German industry, is doing in Egypt. And that, by the way, is not only big when it comes to Egyptian standards, this is very big when it comes to German standards as well. We engage very much in the field of water, and water, when it comes to the environmental topics, when it comes to sustainability, those are fields, which are future topics, of German industry, and they look for partners in Egypt, and therefore, we are very active in these fields these days.
Sir, thank you very much for your fruitful input, and hopefully we'll see you in the studio soon. Thank you very much. Engineer Mohammed, sorry. The role of the chamber is to wed business between Egypt and Germany. What kind of potential are we offering Egyptian businessmen abroad in Germany and vice versa? We talked a lot about the potential in sectors here in Egypt, but let us go into as well investment of Egyptians investing in Germany, because it really is a two-way road. What kind of potential do Egyptians have abroad?
Well, you're talking about funneling investment from Egyptian businessmen who live abroad in Germany, rather than funneling investment from Egypt to Germany, if I understand you correctly. Well, of course, people or Egyptians living abroad investing in businesses in Europe would probably be geared more towards technology development rather than anything that is hard projects, really. It's more technology development, if there is the intention of using those investments to the benefit of the relation between the two. Because that can then be channeled into Egypt for fostering this kind of cooperation. Nevertheless, if we, out of all the sectors that we were talking about, for example, the renewable energy sector has taken a big boost in Europe in the last 3 or 4 years. That is already one sector where Egyptian businessmen who live in Europe can invest in right there, in renewable energy in those markets themselves. But I advocate that if we want to build towards this cooperation, then technology development is the way. I believe so. There is a lot of research that is going on now in many sectors, including the agricultural, including the energy, including the medical, for example. These are things that Germany is very strong at. And I would encourage Egyptians to invest in that kind of technology and then thereby transfer that technology to Egypt, and for the benefit of Germany and Egypt, both at the same time. Another point that's very important in those projects and the ecosystem that I was describing, it is a very good opportunity to funnel in funds from, for example, the EBRD into these projects, given the fact that there's a German component in it, or from the World Bank or whatever, since these are development projects that relate to sustainability. Therefore, these funds would come to the benefit of the German enterprises that are involved in this, and the Egyptians as well.
What obstacle, in your opinion, do we need to overcome to promote business further?
Well, one thing we are notoriously not very good at is marketing ourselves. We are not very good marketeers internationally, but we have a lot of value that many people around the world don't know about us. So first thing is to gain our own self-confidence and be able to market that worldwide. That's a big obstacle, believe it or not. The other obstacle...
So we are not telling people that there is a business opportunity.
Because we in ourselves have to come to terms with it as well. So for example, the confidence that our market has in our own Egyptian products needs a lot of work. If we have that confidence, we'll be able to sell it to the world. That's an obstacle. It's a soft obstacle.
Okay.
A hard obstacle would be our bureaucracy.
Yes.
We will need to cut down on bureaucracy and streamline our processes and our government approvals.
We have lots of
yes, I mean, inherited
laws
yes,
that are coming out, and one-stop shop and stuff
Of
like
course,
that.
exactly.
That needs to be. It's more of implementation rather than new legislation.
Exactly.
Whose responsibility is it to market? I know this is not in your business, but the reason I'm asking this is because whenever we talk about marketing, then it's lost, because it really has to be a multifaceted
Yes.
cooperation effort. Because when you say marketing, the first thing that came to my mind, well, what's the Egyptian German chamber doing?
That's one point. They do actually. This is part and core to what their activity is to do that kind of marketing, to make that kind of welding, that link between Germany and Egypt. When I talk marketing, I talk even wider than that. I talk regionally.
Okay.
The idea of creating brands that are common, Egyptian, German, and marketing those brands regionally, that is something that rests primarily on the private sector.
You mean creating new brands?
Either that or, like for example, let's say he mentioned Siemens. Let's say Siemens decides to develop a product in Egypt, manufacture it in Egypt, and it becomes a Siemens product, but it's a Siemens Egyptian-made product.
Okay.
So that
It's like in the car sector, for
Like, for
example.
example,
You
the car
have
sector,
a
exactly.
German car, but it's in
Exactly.
China or what have you.
That is an example.
Yes.
Another example would be cooperation between a small to medium-sized enterprise in Germany and a small to medium-sized enterprise in Egypt, and they create a joint venture with a common brand, and they market that. It rests primarily on the private sector. However, there is a big role to be played by the commercial offices of our embassies and the German embassies around the region. And I will state, I have had my own personal experiences in this, and our commercial offices, they actually do a great job. They never ever fail to serve that purpose when a serious player or a serious contender comes through. So we do have the, let's say, the regional infrastructure to be able to market, but we just have to use it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to put a stronger agenda
Yes.
to use it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our time is up. I'd like to thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your fruitful input. And indeed, Germany is one of the strongest economic and political partners of Egypt. And it's really fruitful to hear that 2021 is filled with more fruitful cooperation. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you. The viewers will see you same time next week. Until then, good night.